Hey, hello, and welcome to the OnStage Colorado Podcast for this day in Tuesday, March 3rd. I'm Alex Miller.
And I'm Toni Tresca. As usual, we are going to be discussing some of the recent shows that we've seen, talking through some theater news. There are no headliners this week, but that's because we've got a really big main topic. We are going to be unpacking Colorado's immersive theater scene in 2026, followed by an interview that you conducted, Alex, with Ren Manley, who is the founding artistic director of Denver's Audacious Immersive and a key figure in the local immersive community.
Yeah, this fits in really well with the discussion about immersive theater, and we had a nice chat about, this is their 10th year in operation, Audacious, and they've got some exciting things that, they've got kind of a home, as it were. A lot of times they were just kind of bouncing around from different venues, and they've got a little bit of a base that they can work out of from this church in Denver. So yeah, we'll hear that interview a little later on.
Yeah, looking forward to that. But let's start this episode with a little bit of catch up on what we've seen recently.
Yeah, I don't have much to report just because I was out of town. I was actually out of the country. I went to Mexico City for my son and daughter-in-law's baby shower. So a whole bunch of us went down there. I will say, from a performance aspect, I was just telling you a little bit about this. There's this area of Mexico City called Xochimilco. They have these canals that they kind of go back to before Mexico City was, when it was an Aztec, and they had, it was a lake. It was basically a big lake with a lot of islands, and so this is sort of a remnant of that. There are all these canals, and these there's this entire thing is built up with these short or these sort of shallow boats that people go out on. They're like party boats, and they're brightly colored. They're powered by these guys pushing them with poles. They're long, and they have like a table down the middle with chairs, so people are just partying. There's tequila, there's beer. They're drinking these micheladas, which is this revolting mixture of clamato and beer and weird spices, which I tried and did not like very much. And the other thing is that, like, each end of the boat has kind of like a platform where you can sit, but where also these traveling performers can kind of hop on. They'll hop on, like we had an entire mariachi band just kind of step onto the boat, and we paid them, some money to play a couple of songs. There was one guy who had like a falcon that, he came on, you could put on the falconing glove and hold a falcon. There were people playing, marimbas and I don't know, all kinds of stuff. It's quite the scenes. If you're ever in Mexico City, definitely recommend going to Xochimilco and checking it out. But no theater.
You heard it here first, though, Colorado theater community. Alex might like your show more if you had some falconing.
Yeah. I didn't spring for the falcon, but I definitely I felt like I got my pesos worth because it was close enough. I was like, wow, that's a serious falcon.
Yeah.
So, but what did you got out to a few shows? What did you see?
Yeah, I went first to see the new world premiere from Wonderbound. This is a collaboration that they did in conjunction with the Colorado Jazz Repertory Orchestra. This is set in the Roaring 20s, and the first act is this whirlwind romance between these a man and a woman, and the second act, in typical Wonderbound Garrett Amon fashion, is a dark deconstruction of that relationship and the cost of transgression, particularly for women during this time period. As is just a given with Wonderbound Productions, it's incredibly athletic dancing. They have these 5 scenic pieces that are really massive and beautifully integrated into the flow of the choreography. The Colorado Jazz Repertory Orchestra has done work with Wonderbound in the past. They did their production of Holly Moxie or Jolly Moxie a couple years ago. But it's not even really the same experience. That was a much smaller ensemble, and they were kind of riffing on holiday songs. And this is, they get to kind of reimagine stuff like Gershwin and Chopin and all of these incredible composers from the early 20th century. And they really just do this incredible mashup of all of these different tunes. paired with this incredible visual storytelling by Aman and the team. This is really one of their more accessible works compared to when you and I, over the holiday season, went to see their production of Hideaway Hotel. That's a time-bending story, often had sequences in different times playing out in parallel on opposite sides of the stage. It was quite abstract and metaphorical. This is a lot more accessible. It's very easy to pick up on the plot in this production, and then it's just really elaborately produced, as Wonderbound is known to do.
Yeah. And then you saw Elemental Theater Company's production of The Runner Stumbles. So this is the theater company formerly known as Wheat Ridge Theater Company. So this one was a little bit of a mixed bag. I think in your review, you kind of shouted out to them that they really tackled a challenging piece of material here and had some good performances and some good things, but a couple of maybe a couple of stumbles in the in the stumbles.
Yeah, good. I resisted that wordplay in my review. I was like,
okay.
The runner stumbles. I feel like it's too,
yeah.
I've got to come up with something slightly more elevated if I'm going to write it down. But it was definitely a messy production. This is one of the first works from Elemental, and they're clearly defining that they want to do these kind of interesting, more edgy, kind of adult, serious plays there. And I think that's a really valuable, important niche to be filled in the community. And so I was really happy to see them try to tackle this work, but it was really slow. The pacing was off, in particular because this is a play that plays out across multiple time periods and settings. Specifically, there is a jail cell, there is a past with this priest and this nun in their home, in the priest's home together, and then there is the courtroom. And rather than kind of have different sections to represent these different areas, the director had the actors physically move and change the set between every single scene. And this is a play it makes sense why it was adapted into a film, because it's really quick and cinematic. There's lots of shifts from times and locations that make a lot of sense to tell from a visual perspective on film, but it's really tricky and it can get clunky in a theatrical setting if it's not paced and directed really well. And I think that just got away, the fundamentals in this case got away from the team here, as they're clearly trying to execute this elaborate moving set piece, but it just came at the effect of the pace.
Yeah. It's funny to think about that's a common thing with a lot of theaters fall into that trap where they've got these set piece movement that just takes up too much time, and also pacing, because I think it's almost like a writer who didn't go through and edit out all the extraneous stuff. Sometimes they get too, and I'm not saying this is the case with this one, but we see it a lot where they get too into, or maybe too precious about every moment that they've created and drag it out too much. And it's like, man, that's not what audiences want, man. You got to keep things moving.
Definitely. And I think another part of the issue is that the kind of the two lead actors, they had some nice moments here and there, but a lot of the times the cues were just a little bit slow, and they would just lurch between emotional beats. Like they would go from I'm fine and happy to now I'm really angry to now I'm crying, without a lot of transitions between those different emotional beats, and that just makes it really hard to connect to the characters.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got a lot more shows coming up that we'll be reviewing in the next week or two. We'll talk about those a little later. But first, before we get to our main topic, let's talk about some of the news. There's big news from the Arvada Center. What's going on over there?
Yeah, so following a national search, the board of directors has appointed Noelle Delage as the next president and CEO of the Arvada Center. So she's going to officially assume the role on July 1st, 2026, as Philip Sneed retires on June 30th.
Yeah, that's big news. And I tell you, looking at her background, she looks like a great pick on paper. So tell us a little bit about where she came from.
So she is coming from the Denver Zoo. That is where she currently is still working as the Chief Communications and Philanthropy Officer. And she's got a lot of experience as a fundraiser. If you remember to when we talked about the Arvada Center doing this national search, I told you that they were really looking for somebody who had a strong fundraising background to take on this position. And she has that. She's helped execute a $75 million capital effort that ultimately raised more than $82 million. And she helped grow the zoo's flock party event into a $1 million annual fundraiser. And
Well,
that's a lot. If that experience being applied to the Arvada Center, I think there's a lot of potential for growth and expansion of the Arvada Center's mission.
yeah, because we've talked about the Arvada Center and their fundraising, perhaps deficits or deficiencies. So she could really
Yes.
supercharge that, sounds like.
Yeah, as we've talked about on the podcast, they have multiple people working on their fundraising team, and yet they only are able to raise about $1 million-ish a year. And Noelle, as we just talked about, she built an event that raised that in one single day over at the zoo and has experience with developing and executing these long-term, large-scale capital campaigns. I'm not sure if anything like that is on the horizon over the Arvada Center. They seem to have a pretty lovely space. I'm not sure if it needs any major improvements, but you never know behind what's going on behind the scenes, and it's always good to have a money person there who can help support the art. That's important too.
OnStage Colorado receives support from the Boulder Ensemble Theater Company, whose production of John Patrick Shanley's Brooklyn Laundry runs February 20th through March 15th at the Dairy Arts Center. Tragic and funny by turns, this deeply romantic story will remind you what is important in life and the sorrow and joy of fully embracing adulthood. Tickets at betc.org. Also supporting the podcast is Bob Blue Theater in Fort Collins, presenting Oscar Wilde's classic comedy, The Importance of Being Earnest, February 20th through March 15th. Tickets at basbleu.org. And OnStage Colorado is brought to you by Theater Silco in Silverthorne, presenting Fully Committed, February 27th through March 15th. This one-actor comedy brings us to the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan, where the phone never stops ringing, the demands never end, and one overworked reservationist is trying to keep it all together. Tickets at thesilco.org. OnStage Colorado is sponsored in part by Colorado Candlelight, presenting the classic musical Hello, Dolly, featuring humor, romance, energetic dance, and some of the greatest songs in musical theater history through April 4th. Tickets at coloradocandlelight.com. Also sponsoring OnStage Colorado is Miners Alley Performing Arts Center in Golden, presenting Paul Stroley's comedy My Mother and the Michigan-Ohio War, February 20th through March 29th. It's a laugh-out-loud look at the battles we never outgrow, no matter how old we get. Tickets at minersalley.com. OnStage Colorado is brought to you by the Curious Theater Company, whose production of Birthday Candles runs March 7th through April 15th. Noah Hadel's play covers 5 generations, an infinity of dreams, and one cake baked over a century. Tickets at curioustheater.org. Yeah, and of course, this position does not necessarily directly oversee the theater division or the artistic director and all that. Does that person does that in Lynn Collins? But you never know when someone like that moves in if they want to make other changes. So keep an eye out to see what happens at the Arvada Center.
Definitely.
What else?
Over in the Colorado film world, there's some drama, and not just on the big screen. Donald Zuckerman, who is the state's ousted film commissioner, announced last week that he intends to sue the state of Colorado over what he claims was wrongful termination.
Wow, that's big news. Yeah, what's going on there?
Yeah, so originally what was reported was that Zuckerman he's having to leave after his tenure. He had brought the Sundance Film Festival here. He was a major part of Colorado winning that bid, but he was fired in September. He was told, he now says, at the time, for yelling at his coworker, which is obviously not kosher. You should not be going around just yelling at the coworkers. But his legal team is saying that they're going to sue now on the basis that his firing was, quote, abrupt, arbitrary, and capricious?
Capricious. Wow. Okay.
Capricious. Yeah, excuse me.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like that's kind of what people accuse the Trump administration of doing, being abrupt, arbitrary, and capricious. So not to compare them to that, but that's just kind of like off with their heads kind of management can certainly
Definitely
get in hot water either way. So wow. So
Yeah.
What's he looking for? He's looking for money, or
So
something like
that not at all, actually. According to documents filed by Baker Law Group, the notice of claim is charging the state with defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, age discrimination, unlawful retaliation, and wrongful dischargement. And Zuckerman says all he wants is a hard apology, along with reimbursement of the legal fees that he's doing right now. But he's not actually looking to seek damages per se. He just wants the state to recognize that what they did was wrong and offer him an apology.
a hard apology, not just like, sorry, whatever.
That's a quote.
It's got to be,
right, yeah.
I'm going to get down on one knee and beg your forgiveness.
Yeah. He believes that he was targeted for erasure by Eve Leberman, who is the executive director of the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. He claims that Eve was really interested in taking credit for Sundance herself and for her department. And so it's a lot easier to take credit if you push out, this is what he says, the guy who brought Sundance there. And so he called her out in this process, and he also called out Governor Jared Polis for not doing anything to prevent the firing, saying, quote, "It is an embarrassment that he," meaning Jared Polis, "didn't do anything." Obviously, in response, the state is disputing this. The department where Eve works said that they are committed to fostering a safe and healthy workplace for all, while upholding workplace policies and the law. As a general practice, we don't discuss specific personnel issues in order to protect all parties, but they do say that they dispute the allegations in this demand letter by Zuckerman. So this is all going to court. This is not going to be the last we hear of this situation, but it just makes the Sundance of it all a little bit more messy.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate situation, But well, anyway, speaking of Sundance, they announced some things about the festival move and its move to Boulder in 2027. What'd they tell us?
Yeah, right after we got done recording the podcast last week, I got a press release from Sundance, and I was like, "This is just rude, people. Can't you get on our recording schedule so we can integrate this into the podcast?" But they announced last week that the event was going to be taking place in Boulder, January 21st through the 31st, 2027. And perhaps more importantly for us folks who are watching the event here and who are in the arts community, they also announced the official venues for the event. So for film screenings, they're going to be utilizing the Dairy, Boulder High School, Boulder Theater, Casey Middle School, Chautauqua Auditorium, Cinemark Century, E-Town Hall, Mackey Auditorium, Mazinger Auditorium, and the Row Green Theater. All of those last three at the University of Colorado Boulder. And then for talks and festival programming, they're going to be using the Canyon Theater, which is over at the Boulder Public Library, the Dairy, E-Town Hall, and Old Main at CU Boulder.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, there's plenty of venues to choose from there. There in Boulder. I was going to say, I'm glad they're not trying to do a film on Old Main. That would that's a pretty decrepit building. I think they've updated a little bit recently. So
they did update it just a little bit, and I have seen some theater performances over in Old Main. It's not a bad venue for that, but it's a little tight for the kind of film screenings that they do there, and I'm not sure how the projector is in that space. So
yeah,
makes sense that they chose some other venues for the screening part of it.
Of course, Munzinger is a huge lecture hall right by the UMC there in Boulder that's been showing films for years. So I remember it because it was controversial when I was there at school in the 80s. There was a fraternity that used to show porn films there, if you can believe that. And eventually, that was deemed to be inappropriate for any number of reasons. But yeah, they were in Munzinger there.
Yeah, fair enough. I could see why maybe some people had some complaints about that.
Yeah. So, well, there'll be a lot more news about Sundance coming up as the year evolves, and we will certainly be staying on top of it because we were very excited about that.
Absolutely. And I think it is really interesting to see these venue announcements. They were true to their words. They said, the organizers, that when they came to Boulder, first year was going to be entirely within the city limits of Boulder. And they have delivered. I know there were a lot of critics. I voiced some concerns. I was like, does Boulder have enough venues to actually be able to produce an event of this scale? And they the city has definitely been working with these venues to get them up to scale. Like you see places like Chautauqua Auditorium has winterized so that venue can be used fully around the year. That was done specifically to attract Sundance, put that venue online for the festival, because previously there was no air conditioning over there. And so that meant during the winter, no air conditioning or heating. So that meant during the summer, hot as hell. During the winter, you all freeze, but not anymore. Now, because of these investments, it's going to be a Sundance space.
Yeah. Great. Well, let's move on to our main topic, immersive theater. So we've covered immersive a number of times on the podcast. We kind of keep coming back to it because it's, in some ways, it's kind of one of the most dynamic areas of performance art in the state compared to some others. Over the past few years, Colorado's sort of become a laboratory for immersive work. We've seen everything from sort of scrappy indie troupes experimenting in warehouses, fields, shipping crates, breweries, nonprofit groups build community festivals. And now in 2026, we're seeing something a little new: permanent immersive venues, large-scale production models, and some major shifts, including the departure of the biggest immersive program in the shape of the Denver Center's Off Center.
Yeah, I think 2026 in a lot of ways feels like an inflection point in the local immersive scene. For many years, immersive was really known for being quite experimental and largely nomadic, meaning that their venues or people who were producing immersive work were not necessarily investing in building up an audience's relationship to a certain space per se. They were much more interested in doing works that bounced around different places. But now we're kind of starting to see permanence in people investing in building up spaces to create these immersive works. But at the same time, we're also seeing big institutions retreat from funding immersive.
Yeah. So, Off Center, like I said, that was the Denver Center's immersive wing, announced last fall that it would no longer invest in develop or producing original immersive theater. So they might still have some stuff coming through, that was developed elsewhere. But, they did this sort of reprise of Sweet and Lucky last year that they sort of swung big on, and it was I guess I would say it was sort of a disaster. It just didn't sell. It wasn't very good. So it'll be interesting to see, I can kind of see how they wanted to stop and reassess, but they pulled the plug on the whole thing. So they'll be doing some things, but they're winding down their in-house development arm. So that's bye Off Center. And that's, kind of leaves maybe, the bright side is maybe it leaves some room for some other organizations to develop this immersive work locally.
I think that there's a positive and a negative to this. It's definitely a bummer that this big institution who was funding immersive work and employing immersive artists at union rates often is no longer going to be investing in the immersive world. That's a huge bummer. And it is undeniably true that the DCPA's Off Center, particularly in its early years. It was founded back in 2010 and really hit its stride around 2016-ish when the original Sweet and Lucky was here in town. That blew up on a national level. People were chattering about it all over the country. There were then immersive events that took place here after that, which became kind of a hub for immersive work around the country. And I think a large part of that was because of the DCPA's commitment. They're one of the only regional theaters in the country that did have an immersive wing. And so it really helped legitimize immersive work locally, particularly at a time when people were like, I don't really know what immersive is. Now I think a lot more people, like, at least if you've never been, you know what immersive is when you hear the word. But that was not true at this time period. And so I think the DCPA's role in that is really important. But the DCPA is also a nonprofit. They have donors and board members that they have to report to. And so their shows have to turn a profit. And a really good way to do that is producing shows of high quality. And I just think it's hard to deny that Off Center wasn't producing shows of the same level of quality. Even as when I first, 2022 when they did Theater of the Mind. That was a very different scale than just like a couple years later when they're doing Darkfield or Monopoly Life Size. It's a lot less ambitious work that definitely felt more corporate and driven by a desire to make profit, but that is not necessarily the route to making good immersive work, which is why I think that immersive has largely thrived in an indie market, because they're just very different risk models.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so open to interpretation as what it means exactly. You can do it in the back room at a tap brewery or something like that. Heck, you could do it in a park, as the Catamounts, they find these, relatively inexpensive, except when, they sometimes are in the dairy center, but they've also used some of these historic buildings around, or farms, places like that. But then, we've also got this big new venue, the Denver Immersive Repertory Theater, also known as DIRT, starting up, which we've talked about before. What's the latest on what they're up to?
So we do now know when it is opening. They're going to be opening their space at 15th and Blake over in Lodo, Denver. It's going to be opening in early May 2026 with Midnight's Dream. It's a 2-story, 10,000 square foot immersive world that has been created here. And it's kind of riffing off of Celtic mythology and A Midsummer Night's Dream for this immersive work. It's kind of intentionally being billed and marketed on kind of a more comedic version of Punch Drunk from New York's Sleep No More, which was a immersive multi-story riff on Macbeth. And so they're really betting that this investment in building out a permanent space that then they can kind of outfit with different shows and experiences over the years is going to really pay off. However, it is a significant risk. It's got a $1.6 million budget behind it, and that does include renovating the actual space as well as the costs for producing this initial show. But while the team is kind of internally projecting right now that they're going to be able to run the show for several years, it's really unknown in the Denver market if people are going to be willing to repeat the experience in the way that the producers are hoping so that they can justify the cost. I mean, I just don't see the evidence that people in Denver have been trained to go back to immersive things multiple times. I mean, you just think about Meow Wolf.
It's the Meow Wolf conundrum, yeah.
I do think Meow Wolf has kind of, and Off Center have kind of both hurt this repeatability by developing products that really are just one and done in nature. There's not a lot more that you can get out of the immersive experiences that have been programmed in Denver by going back multiple times. And so DIRT really is taking a risk here. They're trying to be like, we're going to retrain audiences' behaviors, and that could work. I mean, I hope that it does, but I don't see the evidence of that. And so it's going to really require them delivering in a big way, them creating something that actually is just so damn impressive that it's undeniable that there's more that you missed.
Do we know where they're getting their funding from?
We know some of where they're getting their funding from. They have a very big grant from the city of Denver. That's public money, but then largely this is a for-profit business. This is not a nonprofit. They are getting all of their money from private investors, largely, who are investing in building out this space. And the creators, Steve Wargo and Blair Russell, specifically picked Denver and started building up investors around the idea that Denver is the place for immersive. And as we've kind of talked about, I think that definition of Denver being a hotspot is certainly up for debate at the moment.
All right. Well, let's talk about another outfit. Is it called Odd Knock plus fictive equals cryptic? Is that the whole name?
I realized my notes on this were slightly confusing. It's two separate companies. So Odd Knock Productions and Fictive. Odd Knock has been doing work locally for several years now. Fictive is a brand new company, and they are coming together in the Rhino Art District in Denver to create this new performance called Cryptic. And so Odd Knock is really known for their performance-driven style, and Fictive is this new company developed by Cody Borst, people might know him from his work in the escape room community. He's also a key tech person at Meow Wolf around the country developing their stuff. And so this is a collaboration between those two groups, and it's going to be opening Friday, March 27th.
Okay. And what is it?
So it's kind of like a cross between a high-tech escape room and live theater, because there's one performer in a timed experience, and they invite an audience of about 10 people to follow this character throughout the setting. The story begins at a roadside attraction built around an ancient, mysterious object, something like Easter Island or something like that. And as the audience begins to explore the site, technology begins to intrude on the lo-fi mythology until the environment itself starts to behave as like a character with its own agenda.
Whoa. That sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely unlike anything that has been tried in this market before. Odd Knock as well as Fictive are both committed to experimentation and trying to push this form forward. Odd Knock is also currently trying to find a permanent home in Denver to continue developing new works and pursue more collaborations like this. They have been largely nomadic. They kind of have a semi-temporary space over in Rhino that they've been using since last fall, but that is a temporary agreement. And so once that wraps up in I believe it's at the end of this year, they're going to be looking again for another space. And Cody's goal with Fictive is to continue producing works in the area while also developing a realistic, sustainable business model to support the work, which, I mean, you really do need both. You need art that actually lives up to the hype, and you need a business model that makes it all worthwhile.
Absolutely. And do you know, are they including elements to make it more of a full experience, like a bar or, other things like that?
Not at the moment. It is just going to be a about roughly 60-minute timed experience that you will be able to kind of different groups will be filtering in and out of. But not, at this time, no, they're not really working to develop it into a immersive space since they don't technically own this space yet.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it seems like, we were talking about like things being something that people would want to come back to. It does seem like some sort of a social element, whether it's, food or drink or something that, you can go there and it's like expect to see something different or as part of the whole thing, I guess.
And I do think that is Dirt's leg up here, is that they, inside the experience, they have a food and beverage service that is going to be there, as well as a stage area that's going to have live music, aerial performers, different dancers that change every single night. So that space truly will be, and you can also walk in off the street and purchase just that experience, just this kind of fairy tale lounge vibe that they've got going on, which again, I think that is smart. The Lodo area where they're set up, it does not have a ton of foot traffic, so I don't know how much they're going to get from folks walking off the street. But I do think that element of having this room built into the experience that is designed to be constantly changing, that is a strong signal to audiences that, yeah, maybe this is worth repeating. And so I'd love for that to work out for Dirt. But yeah, they don't really, Fictive and Odd Knock with their production of Cryptic don't really have that element.
Wow. It is going to be really interesting to see how those new players do. But we also have the Warhorse, I guess. One of them is Audacious Immersive, who we were just talking about. So this is their 10th year, and they're launching their own year-round venue this month. Actually, just this past weekend, they kind of kicked things off inside a renovated coffee shop at First Baptist Church of Denver. So I'm going to be, in our interview coming up with Ren Manley, we're going to get into a lot of these details, so we don't have to talk about a ton of it here. But it's an exciting time for them to, and like you said, a lot of they were very nomadic. They were doing performances. They were using a lot of tap rooms, beer halls, things like that, and having pretty good success there. They've used this Baptist church space a couple of times this year, and I think the one I saw there, Woodlands and Wyverns, was in the basement. This is actually on the first floor, so it's a space that was used, like I said, as a coffee shop of some sort. And so they'll have some refreshments there. I think they're looking to maybe get a liquor license at some point. So lots going on there.
That seems like a really smart move for this company, and hopefully will give them a lot more freedom to kind of experiment with this immersive form. It sounds like that's what they're going to be doing. They have a theme for the space for the overall year, but then they're going to have a variety of different activities and activations and shows filling up that world. Very repeatable.
Yeah, and some of it is geared towards kids, the whole family. So a little bit of a third place kind of vibe. I think they're looking to, work on creating. So stick around. We'll hear even more about that when we talk to Ren here in just a couple of minutes. But we can also talk about Immersive Denver.
So this is a nonprofit advocacy group that is devoted to developing infrastructure as well as helping local artists network. Folks might remember they organized the Denver Immersive Invitational back in 2024, which was a 48-hour event in which companies created original immersive works from the ground up. They also helped the DCPA with the Immersive, which was an international immersive meetup that took place in the city in 2023. And then they also played a key part in gatherings in 2028, 2019, and 2022. As you may notice, a lot of those dates that I named are from a couple years ago at this point, because now they mostly do networking stuff. I would definitely recommend folks who are in the immersive space join their Facebook group or sign up for their email, because they do at least one immersive meetup and mixer a month, and they do them in different spaces. They have their more traditional hangouts like over at the Savoy in Denver, but they also do meetups at the 13th floor, the haunted house in Denver, where they get to go behind the scenes and see how it all works, or go to other immersive things a little bit early. So it's a really cool group to do that networking component in the area.
And then a couple of smaller troops like Elevate Immersive and the Catamounts. So these are both pretty nomadic around the metro area. I'm more familiar with the Catamounts than I am with Elevate. What is Elevate all about? What's their modus operandi?
So they kind of design immersive experiences that definitely have a little bit more of a murder mystery vibe. It's much more about kind of figuring out who, for instance, they did this thing, this slasher parody immersive thing, finding out who the murderer is in this summer camp. They also do a lot of the history tours that happen in Golden. So these haunted, walking, immersive history tours. It's definitely a little bit more commercial and public facing. It's a little bit less emphasis on perhaps the art of it all and more about kind of creating experiences in site-specific places that folks want to show up to. Whereas the cats they're definitely more artistically inclined, but also have that kind of same nomadic spirit in which they're really interested in activating often historical spaces around the metro area, or using spots like the Dairy Art Center in unconventional ways, like having tables set up on the stage itself and the audience for their feed series, eating alongside the performers.
Yeah, and I'd say the Catamounts are probably a little more literary and artsy, a little more high concept than some of the other ones, and so also a little more unpredictable. So they're the kind of immersive company that you're pretty sure when you go to one of their things, you're gonna see something a little different than what you saw last time.
Yeah, they're definitely known for kind of quirky, weird work. This is what I think that spirit of immersive work that we talked about at the start, this experimental, nomadic vibe, that is still the Cats. They're probably the truest embodiment of that locally, that original immersive spirit and hype. And so, yeah, I really enjoy their work, even if it can be a little bit hit or miss, because they're taking big swings.
Exactly. Yeah. So, thinking about these different groups, I have to say, if I had to guess, who's I don't know, not pick a winner or guess, but it seems like these bigger operations are riskier financially. Uh, I don't know. Maybe these smaller ones are better positioned for sustainable over the long term.
I think I think that's perhaps true. I think it's really hard for some place like the Denver Center, which does have a big staff. It has board members who are very interested in the bottom line, the return on investment for their work, which I know for some artists is probably a huge bummer to hear. But that is just they're an institution. That is just how they have to operate, and how they are going to continue to operate regardless of whether we like it or not. That's just capitalism, baby. But I do think that those smaller companies are real. They're positioned to succeed because they can take risks more. They can take more risks. They can be a little bit more scrappy. They don't have to kind of be thinking about the bottom line as their end all be all at the start. They're kind of just trying to produce the best work that they can out of the gate. Obviously, you do still need money. Dirt's spending $1.6 million on their quote unquote small operation. It's
Yeah.
small compared to the Denver Center, but that is still a sizable budget that they're having to capitalize and see a return on. So I think it is more just about kind of making sure that you are creating immersive work that is speaking to the moment, actually is interesting and engaging for audiences, because we have seen a little bit of a drift from that as immersive has tried to get a little bit more commercial.
Yeah. Well, thinking about Colorado as an immersive hotspot or destination, what do you think it is about Colorado that makes the state sort of getting that status?
Well, I think the biggest reason that Colorado was able to do a lot of different immersive works and mount them is, I mean, frankly, it's just the cost. Denver is expensive. It's not necessarily cheap by any means, but it's a whole lot less expensive than New York City or Los Angeles or Chicago,
Right.
these are all other markets that are developing immersive work. It's a lot cheaper to get real estate in Lodo, for instance, than it is in any of those other markets. And so you do just have a lot lower of a barrier to entry in the Denver scene, which I think that's a really good thing here. There is also a lot of spaces that are not currently being utilized. There's just a lot of empty space in the Denver metro area. Denver, particularly after the pandemic, saw a lot of offices totally vacate. A lot of spaces that were formerly had businesses in them go up, and that's sad. But that also creates a lot of opportunities for immersive groups to use those spaces where that's not true in a place that of such high density like New York or LA. And then the other kind of thing, I think there is just a pretty collaborative art scene here with the strong DIY spirit. Charlie Miller, it was really kind of helmed a lot of that. He's was over at Off Center. He's leaving this month. Be very curious to see where Charlie Miller goes. He's a fantastic creative who has really done a lot of community building and building around immersive. He's a key part of organizing the immersive meetups that happened.
Hmm.
And I know it was a really sad announcement for a lot of people in the immersive community when they heard that Charlie was going to be stepping away from Off Center.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting what you were talking about with like vacant office spaces. You don't really, I can't think that any of these immersive companies have used an abandoned or an empty office, but man, that would be
Odd
really
Knock.
interesting.
Odd
Odd
Knock
Knock?
Productions
Did
has
they? Okay.
actually used abandoned office spaces. That's what they were using primarily in the area before they got this connection over in Rhino. Now they've got a slightly more legitimate space, something you might think of as being a bit more traditional working space for art. But they did this whole, in 2022, it was an office satire in a former office space.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it seems like it would be really interesting if the audience were like new recruits that are just starting their first day at some fucked up company, and you have them in some crazy initiation stuff, and they circle around and see different people. They go into meetings, things like that, and there's a lot of opportunity for something like that there to lampoon office culture for sure, with all that space out there. It'd be a lot of fun.
Definitely. Okay, well, now we are going to throw to a conversation that you had with Ren Manley, who is the artistic mind behind Audacious Immersive, to keep this immersive conversation going.
All right, we are here with Ren Manley, artistic director and founder, right, of Audacious Immersive. Thanks for being on the OnStage Colorado podcast, Ren. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you've got a lot going on. So this is the 10-year anniversary of Audacious. How does that feel? 10 years.
Unfathomable, really.
Yeah, when you started out, like, what were you thinking it would be or become?
I honestly always had this ultimate dream that we would open this space. When we started out, it was kind of just like, just start doing theater, just start kind of getting our ideas out there, start telling some stories, start gathering people that are interested in this kind of funny way of doing theater, start building an audience, and then hopefully we'll get to our dream destination one day. And our 10-year anniversary started coming up, and it was kind of like, well, if I can't get it done by now, I better figure it out. So it's, it started off with like, $1,000 I borrowed against my ex-husband's student loans, and just trying to make the money back in tickets each time. And we've just kind of slowly but surely made enough connections and made enough in tickets and built our audience. And now we are at 10 years.
Yeah. Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the Audacious space here in a minute, but I wanted to just, kind of hang on this 10 years of Audacious Immersive, and maybe for some people listening who maybe haven't been to an immersive show or an Audacious show and an immersive theater, what's your, I don't know, your elevator statement? And of course, immersive can mean so many different things, but how do you define the Audacious flavor of immersive theater?
We always kind of started with this idea of theater that incorporated all five senses. So we always try and find a way to engage you in the stories in more than just seeing it happen. I do agree that immersive can be really, really wide and really, really different. I think we really focus primarily on making sure that there is some sort of a interactive element to all of our shows, and that the audience gets to feel like they're part of what's happening in some way or another.
Uh-huh. And so thinking back again to that $1,000 start out in 2016, what was the first thing you did?
Our very first show was called Grimm's Scary Tales. It was basically all of the super spooky, gory, horrifying fairy tales. And I translated them all into these sort of vignettes. And we did it in this space that at the time was called Skylight Station. It's actually the 910 Arts building is still around. It's on Santa Fe. And we just kind of made it happen. We had, only 2 shows, and we advertised to all of our friends and family. And I don't know how immersive it really was at the time. We tried our best to make the tables that everybody sat at feel a little bit more like they were in this spooky forest, and we made food for everybody to eat. We had popcorn and things like that. So we're really trying to incorporate all of the senses as opposed to necessarily thinking about it in terms of like immersion. We started out as Audacious Theater. My concept was always about just incorporating the senses as opposed to really trying to build like immersive worlds. And we started, 10 years ago, Sleep No More had really also only started. So the concept of immersive as it's kind of understood now was still kind of growing and evolving. And so over the years, we've just kind of expanded and played around with what does that even mean? Like we actually redid Grimm's Scary Tales like 3 or 4 years later, and it was much more immersive than the first time. We took over the basement of this bar that had all kinds of garbage in it, and we turned it into this post-apocalyptic garbage version of Grimm's fairy tales with lots and lots of real life blood and selling ponchos so that their clothing was protected while we flung, washable blood all over the place, and trying to find other ways as we've moved forward of making it more and more and more immersive.
That's great. Yeah, and I would say, many of your shows lean towards the sci-fi or fantasy genre. Although your most well-known one is Drunk Christmas, which isn't, that at all.
No.
So tell
It's
me about
fantasy.
Yeah, I guess Scrooge certainly is a sci-fi story in a lot of
there's
ways.
Time travel.
Yeah,
there's
ghosts.
Yeah, I would
what am I
say
thinking?
it's very much in our wheelhouse, actually.
Yeah, I guess, you think of it so much as a Christmas story. You don't think about that as much, but that's certainly true. So you've been entirely audience funded for a decade. We haven't really had any major donors. Is that, have you managed to sustain and grow just financially as a theater company?
Very carefully and with lots of passion, too many hours, frankly, on my part. But really, I think the collaborative aspect of what we do is a big part of it. So that it's not just us hiring actors, it's us hiring people who want to help build a whole world with us. So we have people who are helping with the whole building of every single show of the company itself. I think it's also just been always keeping in mind this idea that we want to make sure that we're doing shows that are not just fun for us to do, but will be fun for an audience to see, and that will be exciting for an audience to come and see. And remembering, it's not just about the art. We do love the art, but finding a way to fit the art into something that's sellable to people. And we always want to make it accessible. We the best compliment I can get is from somebody who's like, I don't really go to theater, but I thought that was really fun. And that's all I really want is, my kind of dream has been to, I don't want to say save theater, because I think theater is one of those funny things that's just been in a perpetual state of like dying for like the last 150 years. Yeah. So I don't think it's really going anywhere, but I do think there are ways to make it more accessible to modern audiences. And it's also just trying to find what makes theater interesting to people that have tons of special effects and can go to great big concerts and things like that. How do I make something that is worth people's time, that aren't just going to theater because they love theater itself?
Right. And, you also have this flexibility to, you've done a lot of shows in bars and tap rooms, and, that's appealing, to be able to sit there and have a pint while you're enjoying the show. Yeah. So tell us about the Audacious space is a partnership with the First Baptist Church of Denver. That's where you did Woodlands and Wyverns?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we started working with First Baptist Church of Denver, I'm going to say in 2022. We reached out to them because we were looking for a space to do our Halloween show, The Haunting of Your House. And they were super great. They're just this really open and welcoming and generous group of people that they really think of their space as a community space, and they want to support all of the groups that work with them and the community in general. And so every time we kind of asked them if we could do a thing, they were like, yeah, that sounds great. Sure. Come on in. Let's do it. And they had this parlor space that over the course of the time that we had been working with them, it had been a coffee shop, 2 different coffee shops. And after the most recent coffee shop stopped operating, they sent in an email just kind of saying, we want to try and go in a different direction with this. We're actually thinking about turning it into some sort of an event space. So let us know if you have any ideas. And I was like, I have one really big idea, and I wonder if you guys might be interested. And they were really, they've been really, really welcoming, and we've been working with them so that we can they can continue to use the space, and we can build something that is immersive and is leaning more into our skills as world builders, and allows us to do some stuff that doesn't require us to travel all the time. I know one of the very cool things about our theater company and that I really love is that we've gotten really good at popping up in places. But it is, anybody who's done any amount of like traveling theater knows that it just creates its own amount of friction, right? You have to get really good at figuring out how to take a minimal amount of props to create a world that doesn't have a lot of set building around it. And it's also just a little bit difficult as a company because, people ask you when you tell them that you run a theater company, you work with a theater company, they ask you, oh, where are you guys located? And well, we pop up all over the place, and that's
right.
cool. But it's a little bit hard to build a following without like a home base, a place where people can really like lock in and say, this is where I go to see shows from this company.
Right. And does the space come with some storage too, where you can keep your stuff?
A little bit of storage. We've been paying the extortionate storage unit gods for many years now. We're trying to cut down. I have a house of my own now and some storage space there. So we're hoping to kind of break free of those chains soon. So there's a little bit of storage, but also honestly, a lot of the stuff that we've been using over the years that we kept in storage for set things, prop things, a lot of those we're going to be able to just kind of put up in our new immersive world. So that will help in and of itself, is instead of it being in storage, it actually gets a place to live and exist for people to see and enjoy.
Okay, so the inaugural, I guess, theme is the Van Helsing Society. I've been getting the emails, as I'm sure all of your peeps have been, about the Van Helsing Society. And of course, by the time people hear this weekend will have passed, and those shows will have gone by. So I can't ask you how they went.
That's okay.
But that theme is going to continue, right?
Yeah, so that's the kind of fun thing here is, and this was kind of the concept that I always had, was I really liked this idea of having a rotating themed immersive space so that we can, how a theater puts on a season, we would have a season that had one specific theme and one specific world, and then we can do events that fit into that world. So the Van Helsing Society, conceptually, is basically, I call it like Steve Irwin for mythological creatures. They love them, they care for them. They're about research and conservation of mythological animals. And so this is about kind of bridging the gap between what is scary and what is just something that you need to understand. And it's also fantasy. It's a little bit of horror. And it's kind of everything that we do as a company. And it just gives us a lot of leeway too. Like all of our collaborative members, we just kind of told them, hey, this is the theme. So we would like you all to pick a mythological creature that you are just going to like be this year. We want you to come up with a backstory, come up with your costume and all your ideas about who they are. And then whenever you're at the space, whenever you're working one of our events, you are that character. So we have a few that were kind of set that are kind of the leaders of the Van Helsing Society. Like I am portraying Aradia this year. She's an Italian witch. She's one of Abraham Van Helsing's 3 daughters. The lore kind of came from a show that I wrote in 2019 that was called Van Helsing's Daughters. And it was about Abraham Van Helsing. He was a researcher and he had these 3 daughters with different mythological creatures. So one daughter is a half vampire, one daughter is a half witch, and one daughter is a half werewolf. And so I'm one of the leaders of the society. And so that gives me the ability to kind of act as an MC for a lot of shows. But we also have Logan, who has been in a lot of our shows, and he's one of our core members. He's playing Renfield, like the Renfield that you know from the Dracula story. Mm-hmm. And kind of in our lore, he basically went from feeling fully obligated and like a slave to Dracula to kind of transferring over to Van Helsing, who saved him. And so he's kind of this lovely, sweet, devoted servant of the Van Helsing Society and the Van Helsing family. And he also operates a lot as a sort of through line character that helps kind of guide people in our world. And then the events and things that we are doing are all will all sort of fit. So we're trying to make it more of a community space as opposed to just doing shows, which is a bit of a jump, a bit of a change for us.
Sure.
But we are planning to do weekly RPG one-shots. People really loved the Woodlands and Wyverns. I have a lot of Dungeons and Dragons players on my team. And so
you do.
they are bringing their skills at tabletop role play to create these. Every week, there will be somebody there that you can get a ticket, and then you get to sit and you get to play inside the Van Helsing Society world in this RPG sort of style. And then we're also planning to have lore drop nights where we bring in creatures, typically puppets. We're working with different puppeteers across the city, in particular Katie Williams, who does the Puppet Slam, and Ryan Wilkes. He helped us out a lot on our first version of Van Helsing's Daughters. And so we're bringing a lot of those creatures back and introducing people. So you're not just meeting humans that are pretending to be creatures. You're also getting to meet these like kind of furry or slimy or scaly different sorts of real life mythological creatures. Yeah,
that sounds so fun. All this stuff, yeah. That's great. So, and you're also going to have maybe some stuff like folklore story times for kids, murder mysteries.
Yeah. So every Sunday we're planning to do a story time for kids. We really want to make it something that everybody can come and hang out for. So we have stuff now that will be for kids. We've been doing Father Featherbottom's Forgotten Fairy Tales for a few years. So we're trying to offer something for those families that enjoyed that. And then we're also planning a few events that are a little more just like generally family oriented. Like for March, we're going to be doing a sort of Celtic festival and Wolfwalkers screening. So you'll get to come to the Van Helsing Society space, the headquarters. You'll get to meet Celtic creatures, and then we'll do a screening of the Wolfwalkers, which is all based on Irish lore. And we have lots of other things planned for younger kids and families. And then also we have our traditional, more adult-oriented things. Like we have a monster murder mystery featuring all of the characters from the Van Helsing world that's going to be coming up in April.
Okay. Wow. You are going to be busy.
Yeah, we set down like a whole schedule. We wanted to make, things that could happen regularly. We really want to turn it into something that's more like a themed third space, like so it can be the spot where people go to hang out on a Friday night, on a Saturday, on a Thursday. They come for an RP1 shot every week, or they bring their kids for story time once a month or twice a month or every week, whatever you want to do. We just wanted to find ways to make this an accessible space where we're doing things regularly that are keep us open and give people opportunities to visit the world.
And it's primarily in that like sort of basement area.
So we're taking over the upstairs area. So that it's their former parlor space. So
is
like
that where you said there was a coffee shop?
Yeah. So it used to be a coffee shop. Yes. Yeah. Lots of windows, lots of light during the day. We've really been working to transform it into something that's a bit more dark academia and fantasy based.
That's great. Yeah. That's a very large building. And is there an active Baptist congregation there as well?
Yes. Yeah. Every Sunday they're worshiping in the sanctuary, and they're a very I know sometimes people,
progressive Baptists.
I know. So, there are different types of Baptists. There are the Baptists that people think of when they hear the word Baptist, and there are also Baptists who are very forward-thinking, very LGBTQ friendly, are very progressive. These are those second type of Baptists. These are those progressive.
I was going to ask about that. Not Southern Baptists.
They have a pride sort of like tool that they wrap around the cross during Pride Month. They host the gay men's choir. They host all kinds of stuff. They actually, I believe in January, they had one of their biggest events is the pagan church uses their space for their 12th night feast.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, they're the closest thing you can get, I think, to something that's a little bit more non-denominational, because they're just very open and loving and generous. And yeah, they're they're down for whatever cool, strange things that their community wants to do in their great big space.
I love it. The world needs more progressive Christians, that's for sure.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, gosh, so many exciting things going on with Audacious Immersive. So it's going to be you're going to keep me busy getting all the stuff in our calendar. So make sure you can send that stuff along. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we go?
Ooh, no, I think just make sure everybody knows about those 2 events, the bigger events that are coming up. Please just go take a look at our website and see all the stuff that we're offering and try and come out this month and just experience stuff. We will have 3 free events. We'll also have ticketed events. So there's something for everyone.
I did have one thing I meant to ask you about, in terms of can you serve cocktails there?
Yeah,
and food
so we don't currently have a liquor license. I'm working on that, but we are working with the church to get some special event permits, so that for some of our events we'll be able to serve alcohol.
Okay, because people want to know these things.
Yeah, well, mostly we'll be doing lots of magical, fun mocktails. That's the main sort of thrust of the serving at our shows.
That seems very, very in themes also. So, all right. Well, Ren Manley with Audacious Immersive, thanks so much for taking the time to tell us about all this exciting stuff going on, and congrats on a decade of Audacious Immersive here in the Denver area. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, it's always nice to have Ren on the show. She's so smart and has a great perspective on immersive work in the city.
Yeah. I think that might have been her second or third time she's been on the podcast, and always has a really such passion for the art that they do. And none of them are getting rich over there. They do it because they love it, and it's really exciting for them to see this new chapter in their history as a company. So best of luck to them.
For folks who are hungry for more theater content, what do we got on OnStage Colorado right now, Alex?
Yeah, we've got a couple of new reviews this week. So both 2 from you. You did Decadent Desires and Wonderbound that we were talking about, and Runner Stumbles from Elemental. Judith Sears just sent me a review for I Remember Mama at down in the Springs. So I'll have that on the site soon. And then upcoming, we're going to be out seeing and reviewing Top Girls at Theater Company of Lafayette, A Midsummer Night's Dream at Colorado Ballet, Ride the Cyclone from City Theater Company, Fully Committed up at Theater Silco and Silverthorne, and a whole bunch more coming next week as well. So definitely keep an eye on the site for the fresh content that you'll see there.
And if you want to make sure that you are staying up to date on what's going on in theaters across the state, make sure that you're subscribed to the OnStage Colorado Theater Blast, which is the weekly newsletter that comes out from us and just kind of rounds up all the reviews we're doing, news that we've got on our site, and listings from the calendar for the upcoming weekend, so you can plan your theatrical outings.
There you go. All right. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Alex Miller.
And I'm Toni Tresca, and we'll see you at the show.
Hey, it's Alex here, founder, editor, and publisher of OnStage Colorado. Thanks so much for listening. As other publications have stepped away from covering Colorado theater, we've stepped up. In 2025 alone, we published over 165 reviews, making sure our vibrant theater community in Colorado gets the attention it deserves. But we can't do this without your support. If you value having a dedicated source for Colorado theater journalism, please consider making a donation at onstagecolorado.com. Every contribution helps us continue this work. And if you're not already subscribed, sign up for our free weekly Theater Blast newsletter. Every Thursday morning, we deliver the latest reviews, theater news, and upcoming show listings right to your inbox. You'll find the sign up at onstagecolorado.com. Thanks again for being part of the OnStage Colorado community. We'll see you at the theater.